Once a week, I used to tutor a third grader from Puebla, Mexico named Daniel. His father, Roberto, we call him Beto, is a short, chubby little man I used to work with in a restaurant kitchen who's got a smile like a kid who just set a thumbtack on the teacher's seat. My nephew Tyler is also in the third grade, but he doesn't need a tutor. In fact, he recently won the school-wide spelling bee for his age. You see, Tyler could probably spell resilience, but Daniel could describe it. Well, I grew up in Durham, North Carolina. Growing up, hip-hop was always a big part of my life. One of my friends and I kind of had a duo group that we would put out mixtapes and stuff and bring them to school and sell them to our friends for a couple of dollars. And I found out about a local adult team in Durham called the Bull City Slam Team. And I went out to that slam and I won my first slam. But also we started running our own event here in Chapel Hill that was an open mic and organizing youth. The idea was, well, if we can't go back and compete, let's take a youth team and we'll be like mentors. We'll try to start coaching. This is not ideal because this is blocking your face when it's like that. So it's better if it's a little bit lower and up.
If we're not sure if the mic's working, we should tap it, right?
Yes, I usually always tap it before, at least once. On the local level, you know, we can get kids from East Durham and kids from Chapel Hill to be in the same space, and they're able to learn about each other not based on stereotypes or not based on what the nightly news says is going on, but directly, you know, person to person, face to face, voice to voice. In the simplest of senses, it's about building community and understanding among different groups of people, and this is just the medium that we use. So our focus on the political is tapping into the personal, exploring identity, you know, building positive identity, identifying stereotypes, identifying the stories that are projected on us, and then creating our own counter narratives to that and helping people share those counter narratives to better understand each other, which I think is political. You know, that's coming at the problem from the bottom, from the grassroots level. I always tell kids 90% of writing is thinking. You know, if you're a writer, you gotta carry that with you throughout the day. So when I'm walking around and I'm seeing things, I'm constantly seeing the connections. I see, you know, somebody's talking about, oh, I got, you know, a concussion, I had to go to the hospital, I had to get an IV, and then I think of the IV bag, and what does an IV bag look like? An IV bag could be a pair of lungs, you know, she had lungs like IV bags with just enough life left to keep her breathing. One of the most recent poems I wrote was about my experience tutoring a third grader. His dad was actually one of my coworkers when I worked at the bakery in the kitchen for some years. And it was about my experience working with his family and reflecting on some of the challenges of being here without documents. And I can never understand why any kid would pick Mario to be his favorite superhero over the muscle-popping, web-slinging, slick costume-wearing Peter Parker, but then I realized that maybe for Daniel, that pudgy little plumber with no muscles and an accent as thick as his mother's tamales reminds him of his father. Working class, immigrant man, never carried a plunger but knows what it's like to handle other people's shit, knows what it's like to climb a wall and leap for a flag they told him could never be his in the first place. So he threw steaming fistfuls of desert aside like fireballs when he crossed Sonora to come work in the US back when paradise was just a pair of dice, like an ivory box full of dreams placed before a firing squad of Minutemen and Border Patrol. He has no superpowers. We can try to institute laws you know, to prevent forms of racism and xenophobia and homophobia and sexism, but laws get broken anyway. You know, we've had laws that have supposedly ended segregation for 50 years now, and there's still, you walk into a lunchroom in Chapel Hill or Durham and they're segregated. Why is that? Because laws don't always change how people act, right? They create a framework where change can happen, but change happens in the personal level. And so that's our idea, is making the political personal, and how do we kind of get at some of those political issues, but through the personal, the one-on-one, the forming the connection through words. And one day, you may find a brick house guerrera of a woman that will hold you as tightly as her courage. And perhaps she will teach you to hold a son the same way. You will have his grandfather's smile and his mother's eyes. And if he ever doubts the fireballs in his palms, she will tell him, un día, mijo, vas a ser exactamente igual que tu papá. One day, my son, you're going to be just like your daddy.